You ever hear a V12 and think, that it? Yeah, same here. Because somehow a twin turbo BMW flagship sedan with 600 horsepower manages to sound like a polite cough through a cashmere scarf. But we're not here to roast BMW's engineering decisions. Okay, maybe a little. What we're actually doing is rewriting the rules of what modern V12s should sound like, this time with an M760i, full custom exhaust system built completely in-house. The owner, he's no stranger to spinning wrenches. He's done everything on this car himself until now. Because when it came to making this thing sing, he handed us the keys and he wanted it to shriek. He wanted to howl. Something closer to Maranello than Munich. So we brought our favorite tools, megaphones, valves, and an X-pipe we swore we'd never install that far back in the system until now. There's a reason we don't do that, but as you'll see, this wasn't about rules, it was about results. If you've ever wondered why luxury V12s sound more like Dysons than Diablos, hit the like button and hang tight. We're about to show you how we fix that without deleting everything but your wallet. So we've got a project that I have a little bit of passion for, BMW Turbo V12. Now, when I was coming up through tech school, I had my training in the N73, BMW's direct injected V12, cutting edge technology at the time, and for me, the 760i was the pinnacle of BMW engineering. The way they talked about it in tech school was just something that I just really got into and really got well known for my ability to work on 7 Series at the dealership. Now, admittedly, we haven't done a ton of V12s when it comes to exhaust. We've done more Rolls-Royces, and you guys may probably know this, but they share the similar V12s. Usually the Rolls-Royce will have more displacement. Not in this case though. This is the N74 version, the turbo version, 6.6 liters that the G11 and G12s went to in, I want to say 2016. However, if we come over here real quick, the same direct injection V12 motor was being used in the 6.6 liter version about 14 and earlier. So that's what this one is here. And again, we've done a few exhaust systems, but I've never done all the way up to the turbos, and there's a lot of tricks that I've wanted to employ, and luckily this customer is going to give us a crack at it with his 760i. So let's get this up in the air. Let's see what we've got going on, and we'll try to see what we think we can do to really bring out the V12 of this thing while still keeping it a luxury saloon. All right, so what I'm looking to find out is the N73, and in this case, the N74 V12, one of those cars that you change the exhaust and you make this thing sound all of a sudden like a V12 supercar, like some of the Mercedes that we've seen. Now, I'm not sure. No one's really put the time into it to experiment. We certainly haven't, but I'd like to find out. And if you take a listen, there's a certain V12 element to it. Like, we've got a good start, a good base to kind of see what this thing's capable of. So my interest is definitely piqued. I want to do this thing up to the best of our ability and really try to see if we can coax out some of the theater that this thing might be able to make. A big problem though are the turbos and the catalytic converters. Those are going to be a little bit of impedance in the way of truly sussing out a V12 soundtrack from this car, but we've been down this road before. We've been challenged. I think we can definitely do something, if not one of the better options for this car, and I can't wait to get started. All right, so this engine is not a newer hot V engine, meaning that the turbochargers are still at the outer edges of the V configuration, meaning we have our catalytic converters going down into the main piping of the system. It is my belief that these are some sort of resonators, not a secondary catalyst or anything like that, just typically from what I know, taking these apart before. The challenging thing I'm seeing is that this is all one piece. There are no sections to take apart, and these are slip fit connectors here. So a lot of stuff. This brace bar is going to have to come down. These bars here that reinforce to the rear, kind of keep everything braced up, that's going to have to come down, and all of this paneling with the rear muffler and anything attached. I'll be honest though, there's a lot of room to play on this thing. The game plan here would be going up to 3.5 inches just to maximize flow. It's a big V12, 6.6 liters, and we're really gonna wanna push the power on this thing. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to bump up the piping diameter, try to get it as free-flowing as possible, and then maybe back into a valve section here. We do have valves on here. They appear to be electronic. We might have something that'll fit that we could just go ahead and swap into place. Use the factory valves. More or less the same setup we went with the AMG V12. Very similar, but it'll be interesting to hear this thing once we get it down, how it sounds with the just straight from the cats, and then we'll kind of go from there. So for a lot of people, doing an exhaust and making more performance go hand in hand, which is why we're choosing to do an ECU tune custom for this particular setup. While we're extracting the sound, we're also adding more power, which in turn can often enhance a lot of the characteristics that we brought out. What I'm going to attempt to do is try to get rid of the rev limit in neutral and park. That way we can get on it more. Hopefully there's some availability there, but a lot of other tweaks, including increasing the boost, changing the timing, changing the fueling, and getting rid of any limiters up top, both for torque and for the speed limit. So all in all, we're hoping this combo will net us about 100 wheel horsepower. Things can change, but that's why we got the dyno to be able to test it, and hopefully we'll be able to really get this BMW to sing. So one of our first expected hurdles is always going to be, how do we flange off of the turbo, in this case, the catalytic converter, the exhaust manifold? How do we make that flange have a more or less easy point of connection to the rest of the system? Almost 10 millimeters, where you can see comparatively that this would be 10 millimeters from this lip to the edge. Making the piece out of solid stainless steel would be incredibly prohibitive. You could cut them, but the amount you'd spend in materials and then tooling time to set that up, cut that, and then the waste, it would just exponentially make this project more expensive. And even when you're dealing with these things as a production standpoint, they're aggregating all this research to make these matching clamps to fit the system into the total cost of the whole system, all across the board, all across the 50 to 100 models they plan on selling. So this is always the tricky part for us, but we've done it enough. Most likely we're gonna probably have to modify something, but let's see what I can find on the internet.
So this is back purging. You want to put argon on the inside of the tube, because stainless steel, it pulls in all of the bad material, like all the stuff, bad stuff in the air. So with this, we put argon on the inside, so when it melts on the inside, it basically looks like a weld on the inside as well as the outside. I'm just taking off the motor just in case, we don't want to fry any of the electronics on the inside. Welding tends to do that with electronics, so just popping that off real quick is easy, and then now you know that you'll never have a problem.
All right, so I talked to Cody about what I wanted to do, and I'm going to show you why that presented challenges moving to a true Y and trying to get these pipes out here. Now, my original idea, stepping down in that section like I was talking about, was to have the canister more or less somewhere like this. But as you can see, getting this angle back out to the rear tips would be a task in itself that would require some really harsh bends, some miter cuts, and ugly stuff I don't like using. So that allows us to go back to maybe using these in the middle here, having them, this one here, and having them staggered, 1 can, 2 can. But the problem is you'd still have to have the pipes go up, over, cross over each other, and you're using a lot of material to more or less accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But then it got me thinking, and I'm doing something I don't typically like to do, and that is try to fit an X-pipe back here. Now, with the X-pipe, we could cross them over and get them back out to this section and have plenty of room. The problem is fitting an X-pipe in there. So I told Cody what I wanted to do, and basically he came up with something. And we're gonna see if that would actually fit in there. Cody, what'd you come up with?
Well, I got this smaller X-pipe, and then on the ends here, we're bumping it up to 3" to kind of go into that the Y pipe that we made. So from here, we're basically gonna kind of put the X pipe in there like that,
and then the canisters would go here, and then he would have to make the turn from here straight out.
Yep.
So I think it's a pretty slick design. I don't like using X pipes in the back typically, because the further back you have it and you don't have enough room to straighten back out, you're going to hear a lot of that turbulence. But we have resonators after the X, so I think you're going to dial some of that out. And the crossover actually might end up being pretty cool, because when this is closed, you're going to get some of that, crossover balance sound here, but then you're also going to have this open up, so it's going to blend both, and this actually might act as a bit of a extra resonation change to the fully open valve section. I'm curious at how it's going to sound.
All right, so we're getting the muffler section put back up, get that in place, and then from there, we're going to start doing the hangers, and then we should be done.
All right, Cody got everything to fit, but now what we need to do is actually hear what this thing sounds like, both modes, open and closed. Let's start it up. Bit of that V12 howl in there. Quite the difference. I think you can really hear that X-pipe though in quiet mode. Still blends through a little bit on loud. One more time, Cody. Loud. Wow, I can hear a lot of that V12 wail, but what sucks about this is that we can only hear it to 5,000. I really want to hear it once it gets over that number, because I think it's really going to start to open up, but the ECU is blocking some of that out. I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about it, but I know this is going to sound a lot different when we get it out in the road, and that's what we need to do next. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna step on it in quiet mode and we're gonna see what the difference is between the two. We've got that X valved going through the rear for our quiet section, so man, this thing scoots. So you still hear it, and it's definitely got a V12-ish tone, but still very refined, still very much a BMW luxury sedan. But what we want to do is hit this sport button, which is going to change those valve settings. Already, I'm getting a little bit more rumble, a lot more depth. Before I do anything, much more aware that there's an exhaust in the car. However, it's still not overbearing. Could it be the exhaust itself, or is it just all of the features in the car that just add to taking away and isolating road noise? Probably a little mix of both, but what we want to do we got that V12 whale when we step on it here? RPM. It's right there. If this thing was going to 7 grand, dare I say, it would just have that much more. It's shifting right about 6,500. Now, I don't know if that's something we can necessarily bump up in the tune, but man, if we could, we just got a little bit more RPM, this thing would really be howling. So concerning the dyno, I've got some caveats for this testing. This car is so long with the long wheelbase being all-wheel drive, it is difficult to get balance between the two rollers where it's not trying to climb out on either side. So I want as minimal torque as I can get from the transmission through the gearing, meaning I want to dyno it in a higher, closer to 1-to-1 gear ratio. That would be 6th gear. However, 6th gear is way too fast for the dyno on this car. The dyno tops out at about 130, but a bigger issue is that the car itself has a limiter on it that tops out at 130 as well, roughly around there. So the dynos that we were getting weren't great because it was basically cutting off right at the limiter, which is somewhere about 129 miles an hour, somewhere in that area. So I'm not going to have a great before and after from the initial dyno. We'll basically have some numbers that stop at 5,000, but you guys mainly just want to hear this, see the peak numbers that it's making, but it's not going to be a great comparison to see what we had before and after because this car is very difficult to dyno. What I could have done is attempted it in 4th gear, or maybe got a tune beforehand that removed the limiter on a stock file. Again, these are all things that we just wouldn't be looking for. I'm trying to get you guys as much information, but we know where this thing's going to be at. We're going to see a peak number. It's going to feel faster to the customer, and you guys are going to get to hear it on the dyno. So let's get to it. Now I got to put this car in dyno mode, which is 1, 2, 3. Press and hold this button. Dyno mode. All right, so I was able to get this thing figured out. We've got 3 runs, 498 when it came in stock. After the exhaust, 521 quiet mode, open mode, 541, pretty impressive gains. I've got torque and horsepower here crossing at 5252. Now you can see this thing would probably continue to go up here, but I doubt it would peak much more, maybe a little bit more. We're gonna see when we do the tune. Again, if I dump this down a gear, it gets a little squirrely, hard to control. It wants to drift back and forth. So I'm kind of cutting it short, but this kind of tells a big story of what our gains are. There's some big mid-range torque here, peak horsepower at 5,400. I need to get the tune on here. We'll see what's going on. We don't have a true one-to-one, but I'll probably stop it short with the tune just so we have something comparable, but that's what we got. All right, the file's on there. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it through OBD2, so again, I had to do it bench mode with the ECUs in the car, pinning out the wires. But the file's loaded on there. It starts up. I'm gonna throw this in dyno mode, and hopefully we get to see some big numbers. See what it did. Wow. Look at that. Now, peak numbers here aren't massive. I gotta clear this screen a little bit, but that's a 571 peak, which is happening pretty much, nope, it's peaking earlier. It looks like it's peaking between 4,700 and now we can actually get to that 6,500. Nope, we're peaking up there. So you can see there might have been another dip. We're still dealing with this valley, though it's much more pronounced with the tune. So we're gonna have to do some adjustment to see if we can level this guy off here. But guys, look at this torque. This is absolutely wild. We gained almost 120 foot-pounds of torque. That is batty, really wild. Now the thing with this thing, we have all that torque. Really where that's coming from is taking off the torque limiters down low that try to control some of the jumpiness, the propensity to, maybe break an axle or something like that. We turn off a lot of the limiters, and that's really where a lot of this low-end power comes in before where we were at before. But, whoa, wow, look at this. At 3,600 going up to 450, we're basically right about 3,600 on horsepower alone. We picked up almost 125 horsepower from 3,200 to 3,600. This tune is really doing something. It's gonna be quite good to feel it on the road, but we've got some tweaking to do. It's probably gonna take me a little time to smooth this stuff out and get a real peak number. But as you can see, we got rid of the limiter. Still got some work to do, but peak numbers, they don't tell the whole story, but they're still picked up. We've got some big gains. Let's see if we can get some more. So after a dozen dyno runs and nearly 5 renditions of the file, we've got a number that I'm pretty happy with. Over 100 horsepower gain in the mid-range, and the torque, over 100 foot-pounds of torque in some of these areas. If you guys remember the V12 Mercedes that we were dealing with, we were dreaming of these numbers, 583. Now, that car's got bigger turbos, similar platform. We should be over that with that car, but this car with a simple tune and our performance exhaust, still catted by the way, making massive power, super impressive, almost 600 wheel, which if you guys been watching, you know my dyno, you know it reads conservative. This is a huge number. So the only thing left to do is I got to get it on the street. I want to see how it feels before we get it back to the customer. But all in all, I would say these numbers are looking pretty successful. We were able to smooth out that curve that we were dealing with, that dip right about 46 to 5,000. So I think this is going to be something that really transforms this ride, and that exhaust is just going to complement it. So what did we actually get out of all this stainless steel and stubborn engineering? Well, mission mostly accomplished. The M760i finally sounds like it's got a V12 worth hearing. There's a sharp top end character, a bit of exotic shriek, and a wide open authority that wasn't there before. Is it Ferrari level pitch perfect? Not quite, but we're also working with 6,500 RPM, 2 turbos, and not a 65-degree V. and Redline fantasies. Adding that rear X pipe, yeah, the one we usually avoid, turned out to be the wild card because it lives in the quiet valve path and we chased it with resonators, so we got more character without adding chaos. No drone, no turbulence, we couldn't tame, and thanks to the ECU tune, the car isn't just louder, it's faster, it pulls harder. But most importantly, it finally feels like the V12 BMW M should have delivered from the factory, except they didn't. So we did. And while the aftermarket gave up on this chassis years ago, we leaned in and we think the results speak for themselves. Here's the thing with sound. It's emotional. It's irrational. And it's not always about numbers. You don't spec a V12 just for torque, you spec it for presence. And if you're gonna haul around 2 tons of Bavarian excess, you might as well sound like the world is ending behind you. We're not trying to turn a BMW into a Lambo, but we're also not trying to settle for just luxury. The middle ground is where things get interesting, and adding a little power with your sound is a surefire way to keep it that way. So let us know in the comments, what were you more impressed with, the power or the sound? And did it hit the mark, or should we just added a X pipe just to prove a point? As always, stay loud, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next pull.